Very good. Well, welcome everybody. It's September 12th, 7:30 on the dot. This is the Parks and Public Works Committee meeting. I welcome all of you for being with us tonight and looking forward to a good, robust discussion. And tonight we've got just two quick updates we wanted to run through. These both relate to Public Works, Angie. So if you can stand by for a second, these should go pretty quickly, I think. And Oscar, I see you with us here today. And the first one relates to our wastewater treatment plant. I know we've had some issues with transporting sludge within the plant, and the system as it's designed wasn't working properly. We were talking about potentially creating some kind of an elevator system to move the sludge from one part of the plant to the other. But there may be some good news on the horizon, as I understand it. Could you talk about where we stand with that transport system?
Yes. Yeah, I wasn't sure which one, the sludge hauling or the solids delivery. Anyway, the issue with that problem has been solved. There's still tweaking a lot of the because it's fairly new process. And so that created another problem, that created a dust problem in another part of the plant. But so they're working, on all of those, and they're actually doing really good. They've been able to operate the system in the last couple of weeks for 24 hours at a time, for a few days. So they're getting pretty close into finishing up the commissioning process and really us starting the testing of all of that, because we need to test all of the final product and then the initial product that we put in, so that the air permitted board can give us the updated permit with the new parameters based on those testing. So it's getting close.
As I understand it, the system involves an air pressure system to move the sludge from one part of the plant to the other. Could you just very quickly describe that, how that works?
Yeah, it's basically a huge fan. In other places, usually you see compressors, which require a lot of energy to do. But in this instance, they use basically a high volume of air, with basically a fan, high speed, and you kind of maintain the product suspended. It's used to move material like this that has a lot of grit, So when you moved it with a lot of air, you keep all that material suspended, and you're able to actually move it through through the pipe that we have in there.
Okay, great. Well, that sounds very promising. That's great news. So we're going to test that some more. It'll be certified, and then it'll be off and running. Is that the kind of system, Oscar, that can run 24 hours a day, or will it have limitations?
Yes.
It can.
Are we expecting to do that 24 hours a day? Because I know recently, or in the distant past, you said we weren't. Are we going to do the 24 hours a day?
Yeah, yes. And at least for the initial, our initial calculations of how much sludge we needed to keep the system running showed that we should be able to do that at least 5 days a week. And that's good for the equipment, because you want the equipment, basically you have to heat it up. It's like an oven, is you heat it up and then you start cooking. That's basically, so you don't want to do that every day.
Yeah.
Because that's when you use a lot of the energy. We use a little bit of gas to get it started. And then after it gets started, it uses the own fuel, basically the sludge, to keep it going. But we think that we're going to be able to do it, at least 5 days a week. And then, as our load grows, we'll do more.
Okay. So I'm sorry, Dave.
No, go ahead.
24/7, 5 days a week, and then you're going to turn it off on the weekend.
Yeah, so 24 hours for 5 days a week. It's not going to be a 24/7. It's going to be, 24/5.
Oh, I'm sorry, 24/5.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, it's been a long day.
Okay, so once the air pressurized system is up and working, certified and tested and running properly, that should, I presume, dramatically cut down our a need to truck sledge out. Is that correct?
Yes, yes. So, and that's why we're doing the testing, because right now still we've been able to produce actually a pretty good product. You know, I have some samples, you know, what comes out of there. And that needs to be tested before we're able to send it to the landfills here, before we find a useful, you know, purpose for it. Somebody that can buy it, and, you know, because it's really good stuff. It's a lot of minerals, and, you know, it's compost is, you know, so we should be able to use it into some beneficial use.
Oh, great. Well, thanks for that, Oscar. That's really good news. And there's light on the horizon here, it looks like, with our wastewater treatment plant. So we're all pleased about that.
Yes.
Okay, then real quickly, I just want to just chat about the police substation issue about Highway 99. And as you're aware of the issue about the old 7-Eleven building up there at about 238th on Highway 99 has been raised as a possible site, either for lease or purchase. And I know we're still kind of checking into that, but could you give us an update on where we stand with that? Is that still a possibility for us to consider, or is that off the table? Do you know?
No, it's still, you know, the initial survey that the consultant did, that property didn't pop up because it's not on any of the MLS listings or anything like for sale or lease or anything. So the original list, based on the parameters that we developed with PD, showed up 8 properties. You know, of those 8 properties, only 2 were for sale and 6 for lease. We went back and we asked him to add this one, and so he found the owners, and he's on discussions trying to see if they're willing to sell or lease, or, but it was a property that PD also agreed that it was a good option for them.
Okay. And who is the consultant you're using for these investigations?
You're going to ask me. Let me see if I have it.
It's okay. The reason I'm asking, you know, we also have Long Bay doing work for us, looking for properties around town. So is there a reason we're not using Long Bay in this case, or not?
I think they've been talking with them too. And Angie,
So actually, Long Bay is a subcontractor to Bob Stowe, who is the consultant on the work.
Bob Stowe, yes.
Okay, all right.
Thanks, Angie.
So it's still being looked at, so there's more information to come then, I presume. So we'll just stand by.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you, and thank you, Angie. Okay, speaking of Angie, we're on to item 2.2, the Johnson Park property demolition contract approval. So Angie, take it away.
Thanks. So my internet connection tonight is just a touch sketchy. So if I drop, I'll be right back. And then Scott, just let me back in. I'll come back in on my phone if it doesn't work. But super quick, fast conversation here. This is bringing forward basically phase 2 of the work for the Shirley Johnson property. We all remember she graciously donated that property to us in 2021. It's about an acre, connects Yost Park and Bedoya Way. And we were grateful that the council approved about $200,000 for this year to secure the site. And we've already spent about $77,000 doing work to remove debris and clean up the interior of the house. I'm just going to kind of put it that way. This is moving forward into demolition of the house and the outbuildings and continuing that work. I'm going to introduce Kyle Woods. He is our Parks Project Manager, and he's joining us this evening, and he's in charge of this project. So I'm going to turn it over to him and have him describe the bids that the bid process he went through, the bids that we got, and what the scope of work is, and answer any specific questions about it.
Okay, thanks, Angie. Yeah, this is, like Angie said, the second portion of this project. DH Environmental performed the first portion, and there was a large amount of material on site in the house and in the garage. So about 12 20-yard containers of material came out of there, and it was mostly contaminated. So it was kind of a hazmat removal. So they did a really good job on that. The house is pretty much clear except for a few hazmat materials, stove, and some appliances, but it's pretty much clean. We had 3 bids on this project. We had one really good winning bid by SkyCorp out of Arlington at 116,000, and 2 more for quite a bit higher. So we were happy with our bids. The site is fairly large. It's unbroken up 1925 built 98-year-old house. It's 1.14 acres. So it's a fairly big removal project. We're going to be removing some invasive weeds at the same time as we're removing the house. There's a fairly large garage and a old barn that's probably 80% has fallen down already, but we have to still remove that. They're looking at a mid-November start date, and they're given 30 working days. And the neighborhood is well aware of the project since we've already been there once, and I always get drop-bys when I'm out there, so they know kind of what's happening. And our neighbor to the south has done a really good job of kind of being our impromptu watcher of the property. We haven't had any illegal camping, no vandalism, no breaking in of any structures so far. So hopefully that stays like that. And I can answer any questions.
That's great. Diane, go ahead.
Sure. I think this is wonderful. So this basically what you're doing is you're going to level everything out, and we're going to have just, you know, grass, dirt, or whatever you want to have, whatever we want to, that's there just to build up on the future, maybe, you know, whatever, correct? So
Right.
we're not,
Right,
because it does say tree removal, tree planting, and vegetation removal per plan, but I didn't see any plan.
Okay.
Do we have any type of planting plan or anything like that? I would think that's kind of premature right now.
There is a tree plan, and we're planning on removing all the invasive blackberry. There's quite a bit. You can, just from removal previous at the end of the summer, you can hardly walk through the property already. It's just blackberries have started to take over. And one of the portions of the project too is the invasive plants have gotten so bad, they've pulled a portion of our neighbor's fence down to the east. So we're going to help them out with that and put a new fence up. So yeah, it's getting pretty wild and woolly out there.
Yeah, and if I may too, we're not taking out all vegetation. We're just taking invasive blackberries, knocking those back.
But basically this, you froze, Angie, so I'll understand what you're saying. So basically it sounds as though you're going to be removing invasives and you're trying to clear the property so that when we move to a future, like, let's say, whatever we plan on doing, which I think is going to be community gardens, and I hope we have volunteers do that. So that's going to be like phase 3, correct?
Yes, there's I believe it's 2025 or 2026. There's a comp plan that's going to be performed on that property.
Yeah. And then as you remove those invasive, because I know that Mountains to Sound use chemicals, are you going to use any chemicals?
No, what I think they're going to do is just kind of use one of those high-powered mowers and turn it into almost a mulch and just knock it down that way. They're not going to fully dig out anything and disturb the ground, but we're just trying to knock it down so the entire property doesn't get taken over with blackberries.
Well, if you knock it down, it's going to come back unless
it will. Yeah.
So are you going to put any type of treatment or anything?
We haven't talked about any type of liquids or that yet, but that would be something the parks maintenance would probably do, and not this project, because this will be more of a winter project because they're planning on coming in mid-November.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Okay.
Yeah,
and
so
then,
those blackberries will start to, they'll start to die off by that time.
Okay. Dave, you can ask any questions.
Kyle, with these older houses, there's often an oil tank buried there. Is there an oil tank on site? Do you know? And if so, will that be removed?
If we find an oil tank, we will remove it. There wasn't one found in the original hazmat report, but I'm sure there is one. That's a lot of times in those older houses too, she had a gas service, so it could have been removed already. Usually they're on the outside above the ground, and we haven't seen one yet.
But if they do find one, there would be an incremental charge to remove that, I presume. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And then just a minor thing, but replacement of the fence, normally if it's a shared fence, the cost is shared 50-50 with the neighbor. Is the plan to rebuild that fence as part of the 115,000 contract?
Yeah, and from what I saw, our invasive weeds have entirely pulled the fence towards our property and not the other way around. So,
Okay, so it's kind of the fault of the Johnson property then.
yes.
Okay, all right, fair enough. That's all I had. Vivian, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask about, from the standpoint of budget, I know that this sounds like there's already been an RFP, but if there are subsequent projects that are planned for this year, but that haven't yet been initiated, are we at a point where we should be trying to pause any of those things? Angie, I'm glad you came back on because you're really the person that I wanted to ask that of.
Yeah, if you could repeat the question, I caught about half of it, sorry.
Just kind of getting that word that our expenses are, higher than we had intended for this part of the year. Are we looking at any of the projects that were budgeted for but not yet started that we might look at as maybe some that maybe aren't so time critical, like this may have fallen into that category, but at this point when we already have the RFP out, it wouldn't be a candidate?
Right, so that's a fair question. I think a couple of things to consider. One, this is a capital project and capital dollars are earmarked for it, right? So these are REIT dollars, these are no, this is not general fund. This is capital dollars associated. So we're not into the operating. It could sit and not be done, but the longer it sits, the increased chances we have of vandalism or it being, set on fire, or it's an attractive nuisance at some point. I'm afraid that we're risking by leaving it standing. So I do want to get it down and get the house cleaned up. But yeah, it's capital dollars and this isn't ARPA money. This isn't operating money. This is pure capital money.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Yeah,
Diane.
And then lastly, because on this 104,700, did they give you a breakdown as to, because that's like, if you're saying 30 days, that's like $3,500 a day. Are they giving you a breakdown as to how many people are on site or the cost to like maybe pull out this or pull out? Did they give you a breakdown or any of that? How many will be there or any of that stuff?
No, this was lump sum, but we definitely can ask for that if we feel like they underbid or overbid. But I don't.
Well,
this is a really good bid. So
yeah.
But
Kyle, will you share how much the other two bids were?
Yeah, so the low was 116, and then 162 was number 2, and 187.
But they're actually they are taking all of the hazmat, so they're leaving everything other than the blackberries trashed up. But they're taking all of the hazmat and everything, so you just have an open field.
Yeah, and I think the hazmat's probably at least a third of the price of that.
I would bet that.
It's there's a lot of lead and a lot of asbestos.
Yeah, you have to do it really special. Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for all of that. I'm good to put on consent.
I am too. That sounds fine. Thank you for the nice package, both of you, and the great description and discussion. So we'll move that through to consent at the next council meeting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you much. And with that, you can enjoy your evening. Thanks, Kyle. Thanks, Angie.
Thanks, Kyle.
Okay, next item is item 2.3, capital project city facilities contract introductions. Sure if that's Oscar, you, Tom, or Rob. Tom.
I think it's me. Yeah.
How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Dave.
Good. Okay, let's charge into it.
Okay, well, we have several that we're looking at today. These are kind of been long-term development or kind of immediate requests for improvements. So The first one I have is the long running development project of the public safety pedestrian barrier fence. A little bit of a sorted process that we went through, but we ran this through our job order contracting process, and then we've kind of ended up with a non-responsive job order contractor. So we reached out to our closest recommendation from a local vendor, which is All City Fence, from Specialty Door, who we use as our overhead door vendor. And they gave us a very responsive bid, a good timeline for the project, and about, I don't know, almost right on budget. It's about 30,000 above what we hoped for, but this was definitely a ROM bid, and so we expect this will come down just a little bit now that the contractors have been on site and taken a look at it. So yeah, we're hoping for this one to be put forward to let the mayor sign, and I've already reached out to Chief Bennett for any cost overruns over the initial budgeted amount to see what PD could do to help that out. But I think we're going to be, within 10 or 15,000 of that original price. So.
And when would this project be expected to be completed, Tom?
As soon as we give a notice to proceed, it's about a 6-week lead time to start and about a 2-week time to build.
That goes pretty fast then.
Yeah.
Okay, just a minor thing, but this just should be corrected. On page 78, this is the proposal on contract by All City Fence. So the total price is $74,940,000.
Yikes!
So let's hope it's not that much.
No.
We'll take that. We'll take that out of your paycheck, Tom.
Yeah. We're looking for bond proceeds here, Dave. So okay, I will definitely get that corrected in the actual total amount over to you. That's not a problem.
Okay, that's fine. I did have a conversation, by the way, with Chief Bennett about this, and basically the text of my conversation was that this is something that we haven't had for over 30 years since the building's been there, and this might be something we might consider deferring for a year in the interest of the budget, but she convinced me that this really is needed. We've been needing it for about 10 years, and security issues are increasing as time goes by, and we're adding more police patrol vehicles, and we're moving ammunition in and out of the building, and there really is need to have this. So I'm convinced we need to move forward with it. Diane, do you have any concerns about this?
Well, I mean, again, I came on with the Great Recession, so that's why the fence was never built. So, I mean, you can't blame the previous administrations because we had to tighten the budget and we had to lay off people. So, I mean, that's why the fence wasn't built. But I do agree that we're having more police. I mean, I've never seen more police cars in the parking lot in all my time that I've been, hanging around downtown area. So I do think it's important, and the fence has already started, it looks like, but it looks pretty, I don't know, Tom, no offense, it looks pretty tacky. Or is that how it's going to be?
No, I think we're looking at two different things, Diane. You're looking at
Okay.
the construction laydown area for our solar project that's just starting.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
that's just temporary fencing, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Okay.
thank goodness that's not how it's going to look. Gosh.
I was like, oh my goodness. Okay,
Yeah, no.
and then I have been asking this for a long time. So some of this, not the fence, but the other stuff are coming from bond proceeds that we bonded for a couple years ago. That is infrastructure, specifically for infrastructure maintenance.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. And how much is that going to be? I didn't catch a total amount. I mean, I probably did, but
Yeah, the original budgeted amount was 270,000, and we, with the bids that we got before they're fine tuned, was just over 300,000.
300. So we still have plenty of bonding capacity because I think we did a $2.3 million bond.
Ye-
So yeah, we have about 2 million-ish or a little bit left yet to
Yeah,
use.
this project wasn't a bond eligible project, so it was moved into the capital dollars, but not, but it's separate from the bond money.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And Tom, that amount does include both automated gates. There's 2 automated gates, right?
There is 4 total, but two areas that open with articulating gates. And they have the, we specified heavy duty operators because the amount of traffic that'll be going through them daily, and the possibility with emergency response that there could be some interaction with a vehicle possibly, and we want to make sure they're robust and can withstand that.
Great. And I'm just curious, kind of a minor issue, I guess, but you know, when a call comes in to respond to an accident or something like that, the police vehicle needs to exit very quickly. Will this slow down response time at all?
You know, they will be able to trigger the fence with a pressure loop, and it's about a 30-second open to close process. So about 15 seconds to be fully open, but again, I'm not certain if they're going to wait that whole amount of time. So, and the only vulnerability we really see is that closing time once the vehicle's left, because with the emergency response, we don't think they're going to stop and wait for the gate to close behind them. But it's pretty secure area, and I'm just not certain that we are going to have, you know, the biggest problem we've had recently is with the new park across the street. The pedestrian traffic has just increased through there so much, and this will really lower that. I'm not certain that we're looking to make it, you know, a fort as much as it is a big deterrent, you know.
Okay, great. Okay, there's some other elements here too in this item. There's the Francis Anderson windows. You're going to talk about that as part of this item, Tom?
Yeah, yes. The Francis Anderson transom windows, they're kind of nondescript little 2-foot by 2-foot windows that surround all of the 1940s and 50s additions to the building. In a past energy project before my time at the city, they insulated those roofs, and now the roofs and the windows are at the same level. So whenever we get any sort of heavy rain, snow, we get constant leaks from the south or the north, depending on which way the weather comes, because there's no sill. And that, you know, it's just kind of the consequences of how that work was done in the past. So what we are proposing to do is to raise those windows up, shrink their the vertical size by about 4 to 6 inches, add a curb at the bottom, roof the curb in, and re-waterproof new window sash in their place. So
I think that's needed. And then we had the issue of ADA access at the public safety building in the package, which has been needed for a long time. I'm pleased to hear about that.
yeah, I had some advice from Susan McLaughlin. We've had some generous citizens donating their time to public service that need accessibility to buildings, and we've had that need at City Hall and at public safety especially. And she had made the suggestion that rather than kind of going through the waterfall effect of making one door accessible in one building and another accessible in another building, let's make a single building extremely accessible and accommodate any meetings that people that need those special accommodations, and move them to that building that has the most accessibility. And so the public safety building being our newest facility and easiest to perform that, we're proposing 3 different smaller projects there, but they all kind of combine into ADA upgrades, giving the east entrance ADA accessible doors, the wooden doors there and the hardware, hang the ADA accessibility up occasionally, which just causes a safety hazard for anyone that needs that added protections of getting through a door safely. Also includes the hallway or the lobby door and both restroom doors, making them motorized ADA accessible, and the single man door behind the security guard to the council chambers and courtroom, motorized accessibility, paddle operated as well. So should make the facility really up to date as far as we can get it without redesigning the whole building for someone that needs accessibility accommodations. So I think it really fits under the bond narrative. It wasn't one of our proposed bond projects from last year, but since it was brought up part of the way through this year, it really meets that narrative of of upgrading our building from insufficient or deficient items. And the building just wasn't designed in a time where we needed this amount of accessibility, and it just will give us it makes strides towards our ADA goals in our CIP and that sort of thing too. So it really fits well, I think. So
yeah, it's a really good thing. I've seen people in wheelchairs struggling to come in and out of the council chambers through those doors, and it's not a good situation. So this will be a big improvement. So I'm pleased with it.
Okay.
So thank you. And then also we had the issue about the new curb and gutter replacement at 7th and between 7th Avenue on Bell and Daly streets. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. We kind of got challenged by Oscar, which is kind of fun for me, which is a little bit new. I don't typically do curb and gutter and sidewalk repair, and we kind of ran into a situation where I have a pretty good relationship with our job order contractors. And so he asked if we could get a bid, and I took one of our prime contractors out there, and we looked at it, and they gave us a very responsive bid for that section of sidewalk. A third of what I think the projected cost was, as well as a timeline to get it finished in 2023. Right now, that's non-secured funding. We don't have a funding source that we're looking at, or that I have access to at least, for $288,000. But it's pretty incredible price. There's a big need on 7th, especially with the increase in park use over there, and the existing sidewalks and old, kind of alley entrances and some kind of makeshift ADA ramps that were there from the past just really need to be cleaned up, and so this would do all of that work and get it done in an expedient fashion. So
and I can add a little bit to that. It's like Tom said, we haven't really secured the funding for this, and I do have a little bit of funding that I can contribute to it from our stormwater, because we're replacing the curb and gutter, but we're short about $200,000, and so it's an issue for ADA, because that sidewalk is really completely out of compliance, and the patches that we've been doing are very inefficient. It doesn't work really well. So it's something that we're thinking about it, but right now it's unfunded. We, like Tom said, I challenge him with that, because the job contract is a good option for us to do something like this. What the traditional method will be, we actually ask for $100,000 for the sign next year, and that will take another couple of years to get it back into CIP. The job contract allows us to do something like this that is almost a design build, but they know what they're doing. We're not changing any of the sign, we're just replacing the sidewalk. And so it was a good opportunity to see, and Tom got a really good bid on that. So if for some reason we're able to fund it, it will be a great thing for the park, and especially a very busy area.
And I should know this, but I don't recall. When we originally designed the park project, we completely rebuilt the sidewalk on the 6th Avenue side as part of the project. Why didn't we include the 7th Avenue side? I know, Oscar, you weren't here when that happened, but Tom, do you recall?
I don't recall either. I wasn't part of that program.
It's probably a funding issue. It's probably one of those where you didn't have enough funding for it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Angie's still here, but
No, she's not.
I think it was considered to be added at the end of the project, but it was probably too expensive, and they were running out of time to get it completed. That was my understanding.
Okay, so we're still short about $200,000. Is that what I heard you say on this? you know, it's a hard discussion because we are having budget issues for sure. So I'm frankly not sure where we're gonna find the money.
Yeah, and we're actually, just so you know, we actually the proposed amount that we asked for to design it next year, if we want to do the traditional design, bid, build approach, we took that out of the budget because we don't want to, right now we wanted to contribute a little bit into the budget discussions, and so we took it out. We're not asking for design funds right now.
Well, isn't this coming out of utilities anyway? This isn't coming out of general funds.
We can only do portion of it and the utilities, and so like the curb and gutter, we can stretch it a little bit, but we have to be honest in how we account for it. The sidewalk portion of it is not really utilities. Yeah,
Yeah, okay, sidewalks are sidewalks. Yeah, that's part of the tip.
it's a
Yeah,
facility. It's a facility.
Yeah,
really.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm reluctant to suggest this even, but we do have bonding capacity. So have you considered bonding for the shortfall?
It's also a stretch because the bonding, I think, had some restrictions. We want to do backlog of maintenance and those kinds of things, right? For facility, again, it's a little bit of a stretch because and Tom can probably speak a little bit more into what the history was on the bond, what we asked for on the bond, and I think
No, it came through finance, because in 2021, they did two new projects that were not infrastructure driven or whatever, and we actually pulled the bond. The bond does strictly specify infrastructure, aging infrastructure. So yeah, there is an exhibit A, or I don't know how they do the bond, but we did pull it up. So yeah, I think having sidewalks, I mean, sidewalks are aging infrastructure, but you're right, that is kind of pushing the envelope a bit. But it is aging infrastructure.
yeah, I mean, we can discuss with staff and see if we can sell it that way or if that's appropriate use.
Yeah, because I'll have to look. I think, well, I probably have it still in all my stuff of notes, but yeah, it may have just said buildings. It may not have said infrastructure. It may have been specified to buildings. I can't remember.
I think it was facilities, deferred maintenance, or and that's what I told Oscar. I'm not certain that it met this bond narrative very well. But as sidewalks aren't typically a facilities thing, it's part of the streets department, and so like I said, I'm happy. I'm learning a lot, which is great for me to learn a lot about this stuff. But yeah, I'm not certain that our bonding for the facilities deferred maintenance is the right place for this. But I really see the need with the increased traffic over there. I mean, that park is being utilized so well that I'm afraid just by walking that sidewalk that there's going to be an accident or something over there just because of the condition of that sidewalk. It's so uneven and cracked in places. So
Are you going to bring this? Oh, sorry, Dave.
No, go ahead. Go ahead, Dan.
Are you going to bring this back up in the tip then? Are we going to revisit this in the tip, and maybe can we switch projects with some other project that is going to be done now? You know what I'm saying? If we have we can't do 7th and Elm because that's way expensive, but are we going to bring the tip back and look to see maybe we can delay another project, or how are we going to handle that?
I like to have this discussion with between Tom, finance, and myself and engineering to really see if we can actually fit it onto this year. Otherwise, I think it's going to be a hard, if we can find funding and we can find a project that we can shift or something. But right now we haven't been able to do that. Other than the bond money, there's nothing else. There's not many projects out there that we would like to delay or shift right now.
Well, I guess one thing about this too is that's the primary access to the ADA accessible playground. There's a lot of kids over there that are taking advantage of that. We need to make sure that the access is safe for all of them too. So I think we need to try to find money somehow to get this done. There are some pretty big ticket items here. So Diane, I think this should come to full council for an overview, and I support all of these things, but we should have some more discussion with the council.
I agree.
Okay with that? Oscar, Tom, okay?
Yes.
All right. Good. Let's move on then and talk about item 2.4, presentation of GFC analysis and future adoption of a GFC rate ordinance. So who's taking that item?
Probably promote Mike and Rob should be here, and also, yeah, there they are, Chris and
Hi, gentlemen. How are you all tonight? So who's taking the lead on?
Good, thank you.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. How about you? I'm going to take the lead on this.
Okay, great.
Mike, was there anything that you wanted to say before I jump in?
Yeah, probably I might as well just do some introductions to various folks. We have tonight FCF's group. They have historically done our utility rate analyses for the past decade that 13 years that I've worked here with the city, and then even well before that. So they're very familiar with our finances and so forth, and have done an extremely great job in doing this. The project lead for this GFC analysis is Chris Gonzalez. So he's going to be leading the presentation. And then with him also is John Ghilarducci, who is also with FCS Group as well. And of course, you all know Oscar and Rob and myself. Mm-hmm. So I guess one other thing, just to kind of, give an introduction. So this is just related to the general facilities charges, which is something that developers end up paying for the right to connect to our utilities, since they don't have those connections at this time. So with that, I'll yield the floor to Chris, who's going to do the presentation, and then we'll have questions and answers.
All
Great.
right.
Thanks, Chris.
Share, and let me pull up. Okay, so just to provide a brief agenda, we'll talk about some of the background related to GFCs in Edmonds, and then we'll go through the update of the GFCs, including the methodology, the basic calculations, and then provide a comparison, because we know lots of councils like to do those kinds of comparisons to see how you rank relative to some of your peers. And then the last bullet, it says questions and discussion, but please feel free to stop me if any questions come up during the course of the presentation.
Okay.
So the general background, the GFC is a connection charge that, as Mike noted, is imposed on development to recover an equitable share of system costs. And these are really the costs associated with system infrastructure. And it's based on the cost of existing assets as well as future capital projects that are in the city's capital improvement plan. And the GFC provides a source of funding for projects and or related debt service, both of which could potentially impact ratepayers in the absence of GFC revenue. The current GFCs have been in place since 2014. They were calculated in an analysis in 2011, and then the council approved them effective May 2012 and phased the increase in 3 steps between 2012 and 2014. And so as part of the current study, the city requested an update of the GFCs to reflect current system costs. And so, as I mentioned before, the general methodology involves quantifying the cost of the existing system, and then also adding in the cost of future projects, and then dividing that total system cost by the system capacity in equivalent residential units, otherwise known as ERUs. And an ERU is really representative of a single family home and equating various connections and types of customers that the city serves to an equivalent single family home. And so we look at the fixed asset inventory, we compute interest on assets as allowed under statute, and then define the capital plan and then the applicable system capacity. And so just to look at the water GFC calculation, we start out, was there a question?
Yeah, it was. The question I have is, you're just strictly talking about residential in this particular analysis. And so you're not, when you say cost of future project costs, right there, you're just talking about the anticipated residential?
No, so what I'm talking about, so the numerator includes the cost of all of the utility infrastructure assets. And when I say future project cost, I'm talking about the capital projects that are included in the capital improvement plan.
Oh, so the CFP and CIP.
Yes.
And how many?
I'm
Okay,
sorry,
and how many years are you going out? 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, or current year?
For those future projects, we're going out basically over the 20-year planning period.
Oh, okay.
So we're trying to estimate the cost of those future projects that will be part of the system. And I will say that as far as the statute goes, the more restrictive district statute allows water and sewer districts to include up to 10 years of capital projects. And so cities are not subject to that same requirement, but we typically just look at the comprehensive planning period. And the goal is to ideally have the system cost be sort of as long-term as possible. And then, figuring out how many customer equivalents the system can serve, so that charge stays relatively stable over time and doesn't, jump up when you have a bunch of projects and then, drop off when the projects are done and things like that. Yeah, just to clarify.
We've never seen a drop off in projects. But to me, when you start getting out 20 years, you're kind of like guessing, if you ask my opinion. But then again, my background's finance, but I can see 10 years. I don't know about 20. But anyway, thanks for clarifying that.
And then the reference to single family was residential was simply the ERU. So we're converting commercial, industrial, everybody to equivalent number of single family homes for that denominator.
Great, thank you.
And so then to go through the GFC calculation, for water, we start out with about $49 million in existing assets. We adjust that total to net out funding from grants, developers, and utility local improvement districts. And so basically, we don't want to charge customers or developers for infrastructure that the city utility did not pay for. We add construction in progress. It's about another $1.4 million there. And then we add in the capital plan. And so that adds about $92.4 million. But what we do there is we adjust the cost basis to reflect a provision for the retirement of existing assets. And so, you have capital projects that replace existing assets as well as projects that expand capacity and comply with regulatory requirements and so forth. And so what we want to avoid doing as much as possible is double charging development for things. And so if we charge a developer for a future replacement project and the asset that's being replaced, that's double charging. And so, I guess to partially offset the concern about going out 20 years, we are estimating the existing assets that are being replaced as a result of those projects, and we're taking those out, so we're not charging for them. And then a couple more adjustments to the cost basis. As I mentioned, we include interest. It's about $14.5 million there. And then we deduct net outstanding debt principal. And again, we come to the subject of potential double charging. And so if a developer connects to the system and they pay for an asset that is associated with outstanding debt, and then they pay the debt service that's included in the rates, then there's that double charging going on. So we deduct that debt principal. And so then we have our net cost basis of about $147.5 million. And then we have the estimated system capacity in meter equivalents. And so the way we came up with that is the city code currently defines meter equivalents for the purposes of the GFC. And it's based on meter size and industry standard flow factors for the different meters. And so then we have our existing meter equivalents. And then we looked at a multi-year average of maximum day demand. And maximum day demand is really what drives the constraints in the system. And so then we came up with, here's the maximum day demand per meter equivalent. And then we looked at the system's capacity and then converted it into meter equivalents based on that definition. And so that's where the $23,199 meter equivalents comes from. And so then if you divide the $147.5 million cost by that 23,200 meter equivalents, you get a GFC of 63.58 per meter equivalent. And
question?
yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I love numbers. So we're kind of in a hyperinflationary period right now. So what are you using for your interest rates? You have plus interest accrued on assets included. So what are you using as an interest rate?
Yes, so we are actually using historical interest rates. And so the way the adjustment works is we can include up to 10 years of interest on each asset based on when the asset was acquired. And so we refer to the bond buyer index. And so if something was built in 1987, we looked at what the rate was back then, and we apply it for that 10-year period. If we were adding something in 2020, we would look at the 2020 rate, and then we would only add 2 years of interest, or I guess 3 years because we're in 2023. But it would basically be that partial period because then it hasn't reached the 10-year life yet. And so we did that for all of the existing assets. I should also clarify that the goal for the capital improvement plan, we backed out inflation. So those costs are in current dollars.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's why they might be a little bit less than some of the totals that you would see elsewhere. And that's standard practice.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And so the punchline of the comparison between the current calculation and the 2011 calculation is that the net allocable system cost has almost doubled since 2011. So, you're about 74.5, almost 75 million in the 2011 calculation, and that's almost 150 million. But the denominator also increased. And so back then we were looking at growth over the 20-year planning period. And now our methodology has changed over the years to really shift toward quantifying how many meter equivalents or ERUs the system can serve, regardless of when we think the growth is going to happen. And so that's why that denominator is larger, and it offsets the increase, but it's still increasing the GFC from $5,050 to $6,358 per meter equivalent.
I see Councilmember Payne's hand up. Susan, do you have a question?
I do, and thank you. And this is just prompted. I've been listening in from from the start, and Diane's question was totally on point. So, what is the adjustment rate for the GFC calculation with current inflation dollars?
So,
because that's going to be important.
So I guess, are you asking what adjustment was made to the CIP costs?
Right, exactly.
So city staff had built in an assumption of 4% annual cost inflation, and we backed that out.
Okay, and so that's what you're assuming, and that's what you're going to be charging us? 4%?
Well, that's what the GFC is lower because we have reduced the capital cost to back out that inflation. Okay,
great. Thank you very much. That helps.
Yeah, and that's also a conservative step that in favor of developers, because we don't want to guess on what inflation is and then build that into the charge, and then it could be wildly different. I mean, it's not going to be a perfect science until the assets are done and they're booked. But it's the best estimate that we have at the time.
Okay, and so because this is all new to me, is this the actual cost? What are the actual costs to the developer?
So a developer, let's say that a developer was building a 3/4 inch, like a kind of a typical single family home with a 3/4 inch meter. Under the current charge, they would pay $5,050 as the water GFC. But under the updated charge, if you were to adopt the full charge, it would increase to $6,358. And those increase in a non-linear way with meter size. So for example, a 1 inch meter would pay 2.5 times, those charges. A 1.5 inch meter would be at 5 times the charge. 2 inch meter would be at 8 times the charge, and it continues to increase based on the flow capacity of the meter.
Okay. And this is for all new construction.
This is for new construction or redevelopment that would increase the meter size.
Okay. Got it. So anything that increases meter size.
Yeah.
New, and then whatever increases meter size. Okay. Thank you. This is, like I said, this is all new. Thank you for your clarification. It's very helpful.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Diane, you have a question?
Oh,
Yeah, I do. I actually have more of a comment. If you think about it, this isn't really bad for over a 12-year period, because I went ahead and, took the numbers, and it's like $118 per year. So, I mean, to me, considering that we have really not had that much growth, that it looks as though it's pretty consistent that what you've done in your numbers, to me, would seem pretty realistic what you're charging.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks.
If we look at the stormwater GFC calculation, the methodology is largely the same as what I talked about on the water slide. And let's see here. So about 21 million in existing assets. We take off 3 million in grant funded assets. We add about 4.7 million in construction in progress, a capital plan of about $56 million, which 8.7 million of that we expect to be funded by grants. So we take that out as well. The provision for retirements of existing assets, that's another 4 million off the top. $3.9 million of interest we include, and then adjust for the net debt principal. So we end up with a cost basis of about $69 million. And so then we divide that by our system capacity estimate in equivalent service units of 22,000. And then we get our GFC of $3,122 per ESU. And I will say the denominator in this case, we're really looking at impervious area and single family residential units based on how the city defines the ESU. And so we looked at the Snohomish County Buildable Lands Report and got estimates of potentially developable areas for development other than single family homes. And then we also got an estimate of the number of single family units, which are assigned one ESU as a matter of policy. And by definition, it's an ESU is supposed to represent kind of a typical single family parcel. And so then that's how we came up with that estimate of 22,000. It's roughly the same as the 2011 calculation, though interestingly enough, it's actually a little bit less. And the 2011 calculation looked at the existing total at the time and 20 years of projected growth. But what we're seeing in the updated calculation is based on the actual land that can be developed. The potential growth is slightly less than those growth assumptions. But yeah, the denominator remained roughly the same, but the cost base is quadruple almost since the 2011 calculation. And so that's why there's a commensurate change in the GFC per ESU.
Hey, Chris, I have a question for you. Just curiosity. So the GFC is a charge to the developer, stormwater GFC. Yet in the second line, it says we're going to receive funding from grants and also from developers. And so what funding do we get from developers that's in that line item in addition to the GFC charge we're assessing?
So that line, the reference is more more general for all the utilities. I don't know off the top of my head what stormwater projects would be, but if a developer is going to contribute an extension, like they build a main or something, and they donate it to the city, then those are the costs that we would take out there. So, I mean, I've added some specific types of funding there in the labeling, but what it really is, it's stuff that the city utility is not paying for.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And for that, we differentiate between infrastructure that's donated and then GFCs, and we don't deduct developer GFC payments from this, because the fact that someone else paid something in the past doesn't mean that that decreases the equitable share for other developers.
Thank you.
So then we go to the sewer GFC calculation and going through the various steps. I mean, one major difference between the sewer GFC and the other GFCs is there is the Edmonds wastewater treatment plant, which has several partner agencies, including the city of Mount Lake Terrace, the city of Shoreline, and Olympic View Water and Sewer District. And so we wanted to make sure that we adjust the cost basis to take out the contributions that have been made by those other agencies. So we're really trying to capture, what did the city utility fund? And so based on that and the various things that we've talked about for the other calculations, we have a net cost basis of about $185 million. And then likewise, under the system capacity and ERUs, we're looking at what is Edmonds' share of the capacity. And it includes Edmonds' share of the capacity at the Edmonds wastewater treatment plant, and then also Edmonds has capacity at the Linwood wastewater treatment plant, and so it includes both of those. And we looked at maximum month flow, maximum month loadings in terms of the typical things that are measured in wastewater, and we came up with the estimate of 28,000 ERUs, being the capacity that Edmonds has available. And so if we divide our cost basis by the ERUs, we get a GFC of $6,598 per ERU, compared to the existing charge of $4,417. And so the net allocable cost has tripled since the 2011 calculation. But the current calculation reflects a higher estimate of ERUs. And again, kind of like on the water side, this is really based on what does your capacity get you versus what growth do we project over 20 years?
A quick question.
Oh, yes.
Back up. It says second line item plus construction work in progress. Does that include sewer lines as well as the treatment plant?
Yes, that includes both of the utility funds, their construction in progress, but it takes out funding from ULIDs and then the treatment plant partner agencies, which are the bulk of that. And so I tried to limit the number of lines here, so I kind of rolled some of those up.
Right. Thank you.
And so to show you the comparison, right now you're at the low end of the spectrum, and here we tried to get some local cities, but also some other comparable jurisdictions. And so right now your combined charge is $10,266 per equivalent unit. Only Linwood is lower than you, and that's because they only have a sewer GFC. They don't have a water or stormwater GFC. And I confirmed that with my colleagues that do the work for Linwood. They've calculated GFCs and they're quite a bit higher than that, but they haven't been implemented yet. And the updated charges, I should say, would put you somewhere near the middle of the range of the jurisdictions that are included here. Now, interestingly enough, the ones at the higher end of the range don't even have separate stormwater GFCs. And so, if they were to add the stormwater GFCs, those charges would be even higher. And so ultimately, you could adopt the full charges if you wanted to and still be well within the range of what other jurisdictions locally are charging. Any questions about that?
I don't think so, Diane.
Well, I'm sitting here in shock. No, I have no questions. I just, I'm baffled how we have gotten so far behind on stormwater and sewer. So I'm just baffled with the numbers, but no, I have no questions.
These are pretty shocking increases to
They are.
quadruple some, but you know, I guess that's the real world.
Yeah, I guess the question I have is I really don't get why stormwater just went bonkers.
Oh, sorry.
Because we have been, yeah, I'm just, and it's just amazing that it just went so high.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it, I mean, if you look at the capital improvement plan, I mean, going from, you know, basically a net of $11 million in costs, you know, you're looking at 56 minus 9, so that's, you know, 47 million. And so, you know, there are, you know, different you know, regulatory requirements and other sort of improvements that the stormwater utility is having to fund. And that's yeah, one of the reasons why the charge is so much higher.
Well, and again, it's 12 years. So I mean, I wish we would have done this like 4 years ago or 3 years. I mean, done it more consistently. So I mean, that's why I said I'm just in shock because, but if you think about it, it's been 12 years. So, but it's shocking to me. So that's all.
It's shocking in one bite, that's true, but you make a good point, Dan. We haven't adjusted this for a while, so
Right.
that's real world, I think.
Yeah, and I would say there are going to be at least two policy questions that you'll have to the council will have to consider collectively. And you know, the first one is, do you want to go up to the full charges? And then the second is, how are you going to get there? And so, you know, you can phase it in over, you know, multiple years to get there. I mean, another client I can think of, you know, they continue to just do annual inflationary adjustments and then use the calculation to be kind of that ceiling to make sure that you don't go above that. And so, you know, there of all the jurisdictions that are on this survey, you know, they have different methodologies potentially, and they update them with different frequency. And so, really, the GFC is a policy call about how you want to recover costs of infrastructure from development. And the key point to make there is, what you don't recover from development is ultimately going to have to be paid for by the ratepayers.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some policy issues to consider here, and this will eventually unfold into an ordinance. Oscar, do you have a sense of timing you'd like to drive this on?
Well, with everything that is going on, not yet. I mean, it's, you know, we wanted to implement it at the beginning of the year. That's the ideal timing, but and that was the goal, because all of this, all the utilities need this update.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking beginning of next year, 2024, correct? Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm in shock. Of course, I don't really remember, you know, I was 2011, I was brand new. So I just don't know why we didn't update this sooner rather than just now. So, I mean, you're correct. It's a lot to figure out, but you know, maybe we need to have this at full council, that's for sure. But the question I have for you, Chris, which you just brought up, so if the cities just use inflationary rates, does that mean they don't use you because you don't need a calculation, they just use inflation?
I would say not exactly. So what I would say is you should definitely do the periodic calculation, because you know, if you don't, I mean, what the inflation adjustment is trying to approximate is, you know, what are you adding to the system and what interest is accruing on it. There's not explicit authority to increase the charges by inflation just because of inflation. And so what you might find, especially, you know, recently, you know, with the inflation being higher than historical levels, is that, you know, if you just do inflation for a long time, you know, you run a real risk of overshooting the mark. And then when you recalculate it, you might actually find yourself decreasing GFCs because you overshot the mark. And so, you know, certainly what you could do is you know, say maybe every 5 years, or I guess historically the city's been doing 3-year rate study cycles. And so, you know, maybe you look at it every 3 years, or maybe you do it every 6 years, and then maybe do the inflationary adjustments in between those updates, just so that, you know, the jumps are not as large, you know, when you do, you know, the periodic recalibrations.
Well, I mean, and again, I like it without inflation, because if you think about it, we had synthetic inflation rates for so long after the Great Recession, and then suddenly, with all money supply, floating around, eventually inflation had to spike. And so, I mean, maybe we'll get into some sort of, cooling off period soon. J Powell doesn't say so, but I kind of like this without the inflation, just because of what we've had experienced, during the Great Recession or the last 10 years with the synthetic rates being kept so low. So anyway, very good work.
Thank
Yes,
you.
their council president, Neil Tibbet, has his hand up. Neil, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. First of all, I agree with the comment about doing these more frequently. And 6 years does seem like a pretty good time frame, and an inflation adjustment in between. So I think that's definitely on the right track. In terms of bringing it to this full council, I'm looking at our extended agendas, and they're getting really full. And this has been about a half-hour presentation. And if we're going to bring this to the full council, which I'm for this particular one, I'm not sure that it's required, but I think the next one on utility rate increases is going to be important for the full council. But can we do it in 10 or 15 minutes instead of a half an hour, and get to the nitty gritty, as opposed to the upper edges of calculations?
Well, Neil, let me just interject here. I think the presentation may be able to be done in 15 minutes, but there'll be a lot of questions. So we're going to take a full half hour, I'm quite sure, on this item.
Well, and I personally think this is very important. I mean, we don't have to be getting the budget done by December. I mean, this is, to me, very important that citizens understand it. So I do think.
Okay, all I'm saying is there is a lot coming up on our agendas, and I can't see spending half an hour on this topic and another half hour on utility rates, and then questions on top of that.
I will support if you bring it out as a consent, because this is, I haven't done and maybe Chris, maybe you have this. This is really critical for cities that are growing, because to catch up with all that stuff, we're almost a built out city. So our revenue expected from this, I don't know, do you have that information, Chris?
Not on the top of my head, but yeah, I mean,
it's important. It's important to update it, but it's really, it's not going to have like a huge impact as our rates do, because the growth, I don't remember the number of units that we have, like the 2035 plan, right? So it is important, and it is, we want to charge what is right for new development, because it's not fair for the ratepayers. Like Chris mentioned, if we don't do it here, basically the ratepayers will take a hit, and they basically subsidize the new development.
And I'm not disagreeing. And in fact, if you can attach as part of your packet, if you can attach the minutes of this meeting, because our packets seem to forget to attach meetings. I mean, I really think this is important for citizens to understand. And I think this is very well done. And we have had a very robust discussion, and I won't be asking any more questions. So I do believe, I mean, this is my personal opinion. I do believe we should have it, and we could probably do it in 15 minutes, Dave. I don't know. I mean, I've asked all my questions. To me, this makes sense, but we need to make sure we hit home that this has been 12 years. So, I mean, citizens need to realize that this, it would have been less if we would have done it 6 years ago or 4 years ago. But I do think folks really need to see this and understand it. That's my opinion.
Well, I agree with that. I'm just thinking to Neil's point, we do have a very packed agenda with our budget discussions coming up soon. And what if we deferred the presentation on this until early January with the target to get the ordinance in place maybe in February? Can we wait that long? I mean, we've already waited over 10 years.
I would rather have a special meeting and pound through this to get it done. In my opinion, because like I said, I think Oscar's right. Some of this stuff, 12 years is 12 years. So, and I don't think I don't think you're gonna have that many questions because we have 4 council members on this meeting right here.
Okay.
So,
I'll take it under consideration, and I'll also say that just kind of FYI about the notes on these. It usually takes 2 weeks to get these notes ready for a council meeting. So the earliest we could provide this with notes would be 2 weeks from now. Or
And
2
I-
meetings from now.
Oscar mentioned consent earlier. I really don't think this should come through on consent because there will be a few clarifying questions, I'm quite sure. I think we need to have at least an abbreviated presentation on it. Diane, would you agree?
I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah,
I won't ask any questions.
I mean, what I would suggest, I mean, I totally could make it shorter. I mean, especially at the committee level, I think the higher level of detail is important to give you the comfort to know that the right amount of rigor went into this. But I mean, literally, I could go back to this slide and say, this is how we calculate it, show a summary table of like what they are, like without getting into the nitty gritty, and then the comparison. So yeah, I mean, we could make it a lot quicker for, the other council.
Like 3 slides.
Yeah.
And have the summary. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'd be looking for.
Okay.
But make sure you key in it's been 12 years.
Yes.
Yeah. Because one's 118 a year and the other's like 180, and I didn't calculate the third. But I mean, if you think about it, it's really from a yearly standpoint, it's not as difficult to really understand, it's not that bad. So that's how I think that's good.
That's
a
a
good
good
way to
point.
approach it,
And this slide here, Chris, is very important because our fellow council members like to see the comparators to see we're not out of phase. So this is
Yeah.
real important.
Great.
And I think just some explanation too of what a GFC is, so that we're we're kind of starting at first, at the first level.
Yeah. So maybe if you're saying 3 slides,
Thanks.
one slide is what are GFCs, then the second slide is what are we calculating to be, and then the third one is the comparison.
Yeah.
That sounds right. In addition to the minutes of this meeting.
Yeah.
Yes.
And maybe even a link to the recording.
There you go. I thought GFC is where I buy my eggs and milk.
Groceries.
UFC.
Yes. QFC.
UFC, I'm sorry. Susan, you had a question again?
I do, and thank you for offering me the opportunity. This is, I think it's going to be big for the people who are, doing work, in development in Edmonds. It deserves a little bit more of a public airing, and and this is not simple. So the fastest way that we can find, to describe what we're doing and why it's important, and that we haven't had the need to make any changes over the past X years would be very helpful. I'm still struggling to figure out what we're all doing with this, and it's but I do appreciate that, that costs have gone up for all sorts of things. And I think that this is going to be good for all of us to be looking at. So I'm listening in. I may not be on screen, but I am listening in through my AirPods, and I will be diving in for all these things. And, anything that we can do to help our, our stormwater and our our wastewater, this is all good.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Chris.
Sure.
Moving on then to item 2.5, and this is always a difficult discussion, I know, but looking forward to talking about it. Presentation of utility rate study and future adoption of utility rate ordinance. So once again, Chris, is that you leading this one?
That is.
Okay, let's go.
All right. So here's the general layout. It matches what we talked about for the GFCs, just for rates. And so the city has reviewed its utility rates on a 3-year cycle. to just improve the ability to weather risks and disruptions, stabilizing rates, accounting for changes that are beyond the city's control, such as the Alderwood water and wastewater district rates for water service, or the water purchase, I should say, and then also planning for large future capital projects. And so in recent updates, the city has used a pay-as-you-go strategy to fund the annual replacement project. So basically using cash to fund those main replacements for each utility. The pros of this policy are that the overall cost is lower because you're not having to borrow and pay interest and things like that. And it helps avoid deferring maintenance. So by funding these projects, you're not putting them off, until you can't put them off any longer. The cons of this approach are near-term rates have to be higher to support that level of capital investment. And potentially there's a reduction in intergenerational equity. And so what that means is that current customers, if you're cash funding everything, pay more upfront for facilities that are oversized for future customers. And with the city being relatively mature, that's less of an issue than it would be on a rapidly growing system. And so the current study aims to balance the near-term and long-term impacts of the capital funding strategy. And so here we have a history of the utility rate increases. We see beginning in 2010, I think that was right around the time we did one of our earlier studies. Water rates went up by 7.5%. Then they went up by 9% per year for a time. And then more recently, around the pandemic, they've been going up 4.5% per year. And then stormwater, slightly different order for some of the increases, but still there have been some notable increases. And then sewer, there were no increases for the first few years, possibly to offset the increases to the other utilities. But basically they've been doing 9.5% per year for some time. And so except for this year, as of February, there was a 4% rate increase. And so these increases have been based on a financial plan or revenue requirement analysis, which defines cost-based rates as the rates based on aggregate financial obligations. So, setting the rates to make sure that the utilities can fund their operating costs, their capital project expenses, debt service, and then any other financial needs, like reserve funding as a result of a financial policy. And so the financial plan establishes a multi-year plan based on projections that extend beyond the current budget cycle. So as I mentioned before, we actually look at a 20-year period in the model, but we typically focus on setting rates for a 5 or 6 year period, recognizing that you've been doing the 3-year plans. We look at a 6-year period. And so the goal is to make sure that the rate increases are stable and as moderate as we can make them, as opposed to not doing anything for a long time and then having the rates spike. And so the key elements of this analysis involve defining revenues and expenses, developing a strategy to fund the capital plan, and then establishing a fiscal policy framework if to the extent that one doesn't already exist. And so the fiscal policy assumptions that we used in our analysis pertain mainly to reserves. And so we are assuming the following segregation of funds. There's the operating fund, which has money that the purpose of which is to accommodate differences in revenue and expense cycles. And so typically, if you think about your water utility, for example, the revenues are really seasonal in the summer months when you're selling more water. However, you're paying employees the same amount. You've got other bills to pay, year round, and so you have to have some pool of money that you can draw from and then replenish when you have more revenue. And so the minimum balance that we have assumed for this analysis is 60 days, or about 16% of budgeted operating expenses. And you can see there roughly $840,000 for the water and sewer utilities, and then about $466,000 for the stormwater utility. And then aside from that money, we have a capital fund, and that segregates funds restricted for capital purposes like GFCs, debt proceeds, and things like that. The purpose of this fund would be to protect against capital cost overruns and provide a source of funding for emergency asset replacements. And so the minimum balance that we have assumed is 2% of plant and service, so the original cost of your assets. And so that equates to about $1 million for water, $485,000 for stormwater, and then $742,000 for the sewer collection system. And so on top of these policies, or overarching, is a goal to maintain a combined operating and capital balance equal to at least 180 days of operating expenses. And so this is a policy that has been recommended by the bond rating agencies for utilities that are seeking to get a good bond rating. And so I'll give you a spoiler here. We're projecting some bond issuance. And so, recognizing that we want to have the city, show strongly when issuing the bonds, we want to set the rates to help maintain that standard. And so the 180 days would effectively replace the other two funds in terms of the minimum balances, even though in practice, we still recommend keeping the operating money separate from the capital money.
So Chris, just a quick question. The 60 days of operating expenses mirrors our general fund reserve policy that we have currently. And what you're proposing here is to triple that to 180, essentially. I don't know, Diane, does that concern you that we'd be out of phase with our other reserve policies?
Yeah, this whole, I mean, I think this is a very important concept that I don't know if we should even be able to start talking about it, because to me, adding reserves to the utilities or enterprise funds, we've talked about it for many years, but now it's like the rubber's hitting the road and we're already into September, and this is some pretty serious stuff to talk about. So yeah, I have a big problem right now with this. And when you talk about 60 days of operating expenses, I was unaware that I thought all of our most of our employees are funded through the general fund and not the utilities, other than
No,
The
all
utility
the,
fund, yeah,
That's
sorry,
right.
Oscar, go
yeah,
ahead.
it's utilities, the enterprise funds a lot of the, a lot of the engineering, for example, but not all of the engineering effort gets funded by yes utilities. Some of them can
Right.
be general fund. So
Right.
this is separate from general fund, and this is strictly enterprise funds.
Oh, no, I get all of this, but like I said, this is a new concept that the city has not ever addressed, like with the fund balance policy that Dave is very much aware of. It took over 2 years to get the fund balance policy through the city council and through the finance committee and all that. And this is kind of like the same concept. We're creating a quote fund balance policy for our utility, our enterprise funds. And we haven't really vetted it, or, I mean, I just think it's going to be a difficult. I'm just saying I think it's going to be a difficult sell.
We're talking.
Yeah, just because I think that it's a good idea, but it's still, people are still squawking about their utility rates. And this is going to add more to it, because we're creating now this kind of general fund, or I don't know what you want to call it, fund balance policy for utilities. So that's the only issue I see it right now.
Yeah, I think we just have to be able to explain that, if we don't do this, we end up paying more in our bonds, right? So it has an impact on that. So it's, we either or. We're not being more, we're keeping on, with the intent of the current policy, 60 days. We've been a little bit more conservative than that, right? And that helps us in our bonds.
So I guess.
Right, so we're not doing anything different over what we have always done.
Oh, I haven't ever seen
There is no policy. The whole point is the bond rating, the bond rating agencies, when they look at your funding,
correct,
they need that 180 days. And that's how we get the good rates.
correct.
So, and that's kind of how it's been historically. So we're not really changing anything. I mean, this is something that we have discussed in all the previous rate adjustments. That was a requirement in order to maintain the bonding. So we really haven't changed anything over what we have done in the past.
For the enterprise
We haven't had
funds.
any policy for the enterprise funds. We have not We don't have any policies in place.
Mike,
And
I'm
we do
not
want to do
tracking.
that.
I'm not tracking on this slide. The operating fund says 60 days of operating expenses, 16%. How does that square with the 180 days below?
That is oh, sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so maybe a way of thinking about it is, I mean, absent the bond issue, we would typically say, hey, it was good to have at least 60 days of operating expenses and, have 1 to 2% of the cost of your assets and kind of a capital reserve. The fact that we're projecting that you're going to borrow money and issue bonds, I should say specifically, is what is triggering this 180-day requirement, which, as I'll show you in a bit, the 180-day requirement ends up exceeding the standards that we have here for the operating fund and the capital fund. And I did want to address the comment that came up about the general fund and why our policies might be different here. So if the general fund had to issue debt, odds are it would be general obligation bonds.
Correct.
And they don't have the same standards that revenue bonds do. So yeah, I mean, this is a requirement. My knowledge is, it's really targeted towards revenue bonds, just given that there's less security in repaying them back. It's not the full faith and credit of the city.
So we're kind of talking generally about how much we might or might not pay based on this 180-day standard. But I think I'd like to see numbers. If we adjusted that number down to 90 days, what would we pay for bonds?
I don't know that we're gonna know that. I mean, because there's a lot of stuff that goes into those sorts of bond ratings. And I mean, you could certainly say, we want to target 90 days. And then if you do that and you go through the bond agency and they give you your rating, I mean, you could ask them at that time, like, well, if we beef this up to 180 days, what would it, would that affect our bond rating? It's not something that we could meaningfully guess at because we're not bond rating agencies. But I mean, having said that, we could certainly run scenarios where, you don't meet that 180-day standard, maybe 90 days, or you just stick to the policies above and you don't add that separate layer of needing 180 days.
Yeah. Susan, you had a question? Susan, Susan had her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'm listening to this pretty intently, and I'm thinking, it's like, so what will the ratepayers across all of our ratepayers, what do they need to know to be able to understand all of this? What are our options? What will option A, what will option B look like? And I think that's some of the information that we're going to need to know. I mean, it hasn't happened for many, many years. And this is stuff that we're going to need to know.
We just issued revenue bonds in 2021. Didn't we have a triple AA rating on that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that part is simple, but not the sort of information that we need for our, our collaborators for some of these things.
If I could maybe offer a little bit of additional perspective on this.
Thank you.
John Ghilarducci. Oh yeah, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, can we share the screen so we know who's talking?
Sure.
Oh. Yeah,
okay,
that's
there,
me.
hi.
Hi, sorry about that. I can see myself, but that didn't help. Yeah, I guess the one thing, and I think you know this already, but it's worth pointing out again that often the formalization of these policies, they don't really have an immediate rate impact because you've already got the money in the bank. The water utility, for example, was the one I looked at. You've got $8 million of fund balance right now. These are, and we're not even suggesting that you would never go below these minimum balances, only that if you did, in the case of an emergency, that you would then in subsequent years replenish that fund up to that minimum balance. So it's not an annual requirement. It's only if you dip below those balances that you would put additional rate money in. It's just trying to set an appropriate amount of sort of annual ongoing cushion to protect the utilities. I think you knew that already, but I felt like I needed to mention that.
That helps. Thank you.
So,
Yeah, and I'm fairly new to this, to all the big rate increases. It's helpful, but I also know that we need to have an abundance of communication that goes all the way around, so that we can communicate with our people and our partner agencies too. So if rates are going to be going up, I appreciate all this. I'm looking forward to a big council discussion.
Okay. Diane?
Thank you. So we did issue revenue bonds in 2021, and didn't we actually, didn't we get I think not a AAA, but a AA rating? Was that not correct?
I think it was 3.
No, that was our GFOA bonds. No, so we didn't even get a AA, so we might have got an A. Well, we can look that up.
I don't know.
I guess
Yeah,
my
we don't know.
question is, I thought it was a AA, but maybe not. I guess my question is, this is the first time I've heard that we're going to be issuing bonds. We have no idea how much we're issuing and for what are we issuing the bonds for. So I'm kind of going back to just step one, is that you're now telling council that we are going to be issuing bonds, which I was unaware of until tonight.
Maybe.
And so how much and what for?
Yes, so let me get back.
Yeah, maybe we can let Chris finish the presentation, and I think that
Okay.
answers some of the questions. Yeah.
Yeah, that one was a weird chicken or egg situation. It's
Yeah.
like if this 180 days just pops up for no reason, like I tried to set the stage. Okay, so as far as the general forecast goes, we're assuming the inflation rates that are shown there. I know CPI, the general inflation, is kind of a controversial topic, especially with the way inflation has behaved over the past couple of years. We have clients that fall on both sides of the fence. There are those that think that we should assume 5% CPI forever. And then there are those that are like, let's just stick to the long-term trend. And then, we have money in the bank to weather some short-term volatility. We have contingencies in the budget and such. And so that's more of the approach that we've taken here with the 2.5% assumption. And I will say that the state Economic and Revenue Forecast Council, they release a quarterly forecast of Seattle area CPI. And they are showing it going back down to, sub 3% next year, and then kind of low 2s after that. So there's, a little bit of conservatism in there. And we vetted these assumptions with finance to make sure that they weren't at odds with some of the projections that are going to go into the budget. And so we're assuming 2% annual cost escalation for labor, 3% as an aggregate average for benefits. Water purchases, we're assuming 8%, and this is based on, in part, we also have colleagues that do work for Alderwood Water and Wastewater District, and they're forecasting that the cost of purchasing water from Everett is going to go up by kind of an aggregate average of 8% per year, and that's being passed through to the wholesale water customers. And then construction cost inflation, 4% per year, and that was based on the planning estimates that city staff used. And so then we're assuming that the water system grows by 0.8% per year, and it's based pretty much on population growth. It's about 120 new meter equivalents or 135 ERUs on the sewer side. And then for stormwater, growing at a lesser rate to just reflect the reality that, stormwater system growth is really driven by growth in impervious area, or increases in impervious area. And so there might be water and sewer development where you're basically redeveloping a property to increase housing density and things like that. That's not necessarily going to increase the impervious area, which is what would be an increase for the stormwater. So that's why the stormwater system, we're projecting less growth than the other two utilities. And so our operating forecast, we're generally using 2022 actuals and then the 2023 rate increase to forecast revenues. And then most of the other revenues are generally based on the 2023 budget. The operating expenses are also generally based on the 2023 budget with adjustments for inflation. And then the budget was adjusted to include some other expense adjustments from city staff. Let me go to the next slide. So this is getting into the what were we going to borrow money for? And so we have our capital needs forecast, cost by year. Basically, we've got $38.6 million in projects from 2023 through 2029. And mains are the bulk of that, the main replacement program. And then the notable major project aside from that is the rehabilitation of the Austin Seaview reservoirs. And so that's about 9.6 million versus 29 million for the mains. And so cash resources, including existing balances, and then additional cash generated from rates over this period, GFCs and so forth, are expected to be enough to cover about 76% of these costs. And so the remaining 9.2 million we're assuming will be funded by debt. And the total net issuance of about 10 million increases the annual debt service for the water utility by about $800,000. And so if we go on to the revenue requirement forecast, we are showing the need for 9% rate increases for the next 5 years, and then they can start dropping off after that. And then showing on a bi-monthly bill, what that means is you're looking at roughly $10, $11, $12 each year in the bi-monthly bill. And so, I mean, if you look at the graph, what it shows is, I mean, without the capital, the existing rates would be enough to cover operating expenses and debt service, so the existing debt anyway. And so it would suggest at first glance that the capital program is driving the increases. However, it's also worth noting that the operating forecast has changed a bit from the last time we did the study. And so the recent inflation and sort of other changes have increased those operating costs and eaten some of the capacity that was previously there to fund the capital program, the main replacements. And so that's another driver behind the rate increases. And so just to show you a forecast of the reserve activity, we show you, John had mentioned the water utility has around $8 million, or at least began the year with about $8 million. And so that kind of jumps up in 24 when we issued the $9.2 million for the CIP. And that bond issue would consider capital needs over the 3-year period, so 24 through 26. And so beginning with that bond issue, it's that 180-day standard that's driving what the minimum reserve target is. And you can see that by 2027, I mean, we're really managing to that reserve level. So, if the council decides, hey, we want to do something less, or just stick to that, the policies that I kind of went over before, the 180-day requirement, there could be some room to smooth out or reduce some of those rate increases. So that is something that could be considered. Okay. So let's go on to.
Well, do you want to have questions, or you want to wait till the entire presentation?
I would say, actually, let's go back here. I would say if you have questions about water, well, it's probably more timely to talk about them now.
Yeah, I have questions. Again, this is all, of course, new to some of us. Why on earth, with the rates the way they are, why are we doing this now with this large amount of money as opposed to waiting until rates calm down a bit? Because I was looking at rates. Are we going out 10 years or 20 years? Or are you just saying you're just doing rates? You haven't really estimated how far we're going out, because rates are between 2.85 and 3.65, depending on how far out you go into your
Oh, you're talking about the debt.
Talking about the debt.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're assuming 20-year debt.
20-year debt. So you want 10 million in bonds or 10 million. You want to issue, the city wants to issue 10 million bonds do we have the capacity? I guess the question I have, knowing our staffing, do we even have the capacity to take on this debt and then to perform what needs to be done under this water utility forecasting, or what, so in other words, just like we issued $2.3 million in debt in utility or revenue in 2021, and we just now are starting to utilize that money, and we've paid interest on it for 2 years. So I guess that's the same scenario I'm concerned about, because this is really going to increase water rates for our citizens. I mean, 9% is a lot of money, to be adding this.
I wanted to add a little bit of context too on the timing too, because, for every dollar that we don't spend as capital, it has an impact in our operations, so we don't show that here, the impact that it has, it's pretty steady growth on the operations, but when we don't spend money on replacing, old water lines or repairing tanks or things like that, our maintenance is going to go through the roof, and the impact to the to the community, the service that we provide, we have more break-ins, more service calls, more emergency repairs, all of those things that really we don't show in these graphs right now, because we really don't model that portion, right? But it's going to be, plus it's going to be more expensive to do the projects on the out years. Those things we need to keep in mind when we kind of project this.
Yeah,
Well,
also the Yost and CV reservoirs we have presented before. We do have a contract in place for the design, and this is to fix those two heavily
For those
deficient
two, okay.
reservoirs. So
see,
those
this is not-
reservoirs are falling apart.
Yeah, and I mean, this isn't in the weeds enough for me, because I've been around long enough. So if you say that, that's true. But I mean, my issue is we initiated this pay-as-you-go in 2010, and we have not had to issue bonds, but we did issue
Right.
bonds because rates were so low. So
Right. If you
Yeah.
recall, the direction we got from council for the last 3 rate adjustments was that we would go pay as you go for all the replacement programs. All the large projects would be bond funded. That's what we're doing. It has not changed. So we're sticking with what council has asked for in the past.
Well, I don't remember that, but thanks. Because that was long ago. I just remembered pay as you go. So
Yeah,
okay,
we're just
but
paying as you go
I do
for this
agree.
project.
I do agree with you, Yost, in the 2 reservoirs. So if that's, again, if we could have exactly what this 10 million represents.
That's what the 10 million is, or whatever it is. It might be a little more, just because we still are it's still early in the design, but we feel pretty confident that should cover everything.
So that's Yost and Seaview?
Yost and Seaview. Yep.
Because it just says reservoirs. Okay, thank you.
I've got a quick question about water too. As far back as I can remember, we're absorbing increases on wholesale water from Alderwood from 8, 9, 10%, sometimes double digits, year over year. Have we ever tested that? Asked for an audit to make sure that those numbers are sound? It just seems like it's a really high wholesale water.
Well, actually, yes. As part of the interlocal agreement that we have with Alderwood, we are actually part of what is called a wholesale committee that reviews those numbers. Us, Linwood, Malik Terrace, City of Mukilteo, and Silver Lake Water and Sewer District are part of this deal to share water, and they review those numbers. And as part of the interlocal, there's this big fat equation that factors in the amount of money that we pay to buy water from Everett, whatever it costs to help with the upkeep of the water pipes that wheel the water to Alderwood, factoring in all the cost and electricity and staffing that it takes to maintain and operate those pipes. And then that in turn gets reflected by whatever is calculated by Alderwood. So all those numbers are generated together, put into an equation that was agreed to back. I think the last update was back in 2010, and that makes the overall calculus of what we pay for our water rates. So there really isn't any markup per se. It's really just what it takes to operate and maintain the system that gets water from Everett to Alderwood, and then from Alderwood to all the respective water purveyors that make use of water from Alderwood.
Okay. Susan, do you have a question about water? Susan Payne?
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it got mute. So when I'm thinking about the reservoirs and where they're located, there are some opportunities, you know, once they are kind of rebuilt, because I know that they're both fairly porous infrastructure. Are there opportunities in terms of weight and what we have right now to offset some of the, you know, the costs of just, you know, pumping the water in through solar panels or other opportunities to decrease some of the costs of moving things through, you know, just to, you know, for the power that we need to get the water up into the big tanks?
Actually, it's all gravity.
Oh, all gravity. Really? Is it all gravity?
Yes, our system is gravity with the exception of one small piece of zone 592, but the way it's structured is very energy efficient. The only
Okay.
thing we looked into is probably regenerative power at our pressure reducing stations, but the amount of water that you would need to go through to actually gain any sort of electrical efficiency, it would cost more to make that go into place, other than maybe the intertie that we have with Alderwood, but that got replaced right about when I joined, I want to say 13 years ago. So it would be not wise to replace something that got just recently replaced.
All right. Well, no, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mike. It's interesting, and you know, who else but you know, you and having all this information. So I do appreciate it. Thank you.
No problem.
So I guess again, why have we not done the bond? Why didn't we do the bonds last year when rates were more? I mean, I'm looking at rates 20-year out and it's like 4.1 or for a
We
A
had
rating.
no idea that the reservoirs, the lids were not fastened to the top and that the structure was under designed. We knew that there needed to be some earthquake retrofitting, but the drawings that we had and all the data that we had did not point to all these deficiencies until we physically drained those tanks and did physical inspections on top of all the other data gathering that we came through. So that was something that was completely unexpected. The good news is we don't have to replace our structures. Yes, it's still going to be expensive, but it's pretty much going to be the same technology that was used to fix the West Seattle Bridge. We're going to be putting fiber reinforced plates onto the system itself, so we don't have to re-excavate everything. So it is going to be cheaper than what we thought, but it's still a lot of money when you come down to think about it. But I mean, we have found some good answers to it, but unfortunately, it's just an old system built to an old design, and then it had other things going for it that just at the time that it was built, maybe it was code, but right now, just a lot of those things weren't factored in. And that's unfortunately where we are now. It's a good thing that we actually physically inspected it instead of just designing something without actually looking into there, because then we'd be in design, we'd be in construction, and somebody goes in there and we go, oh boy. So as much as I hate to, you know, I'm trying to at least say, you know, we're trying to do our homework as much as possible to tie that number down. And hopefully, you know, I think we've got most of it, but yeah, anyway. I'll stop talking. Sorry, Chris.
See, Vivian's got a hand up. Vivian, do you have a question?
Yes, please. Regarding the past bonding that we did for the capital maintenance projects, and I know that we do have a lot of things underway with the job order contracting, and that we're aware, and the reason we were motivated to do that at those low rates was to make sure we were moving those projects along. Exactly what you said earlier, Director Antione, that we, you know, end up with bigger expenses when we let these things lag. But to the extent that there might be a delay in being able to move forward all of those projects, have we discussed and considered using any of the bonding debt that we've already set aside for that? And I know it would require a policy change from council to use it in a different way, but does it make sense for us to look at any part of that already bonded money at those low rates and
Well,
to come back and bond for these capital maintenance projects again in a couple of years when the rates come down?
You're talking the difference between enterprise funds and general funds. Those are apples and oranges. We can't use one for the other. So all our
Okay, even with the
utilities,
bonding money?
yeah, even with the bonding money, because what we have here, all the utilities are enterprise funds. Imagine it as really, in many ways, we're not the city. We're actually a fee for service in the name of City of Edmonds. So the bonding has to be completely separate over and above the general fund because those are tax dollars. These are not tax dollars. These are fee for service dollars.
Okay,
It
thank
kinda
you for
goes
your
back to-
patience in explaining that kind
Yeah,
of stuff, which is probably annoying how little we know, but.
Yeah,
thank
and
you.
that's also the whole point about staff. It's like people like me and most of engineering and everybody up the hill at Public Works, we are fee for service, and then those funds go into the general fund, and then the general fund pays us. It's kind of this convoluted sort of thing. But
Okay,
anyway.
thank you very much.
Mhm.
Thanks. Let's drive ahead, Chris, into stormwater.
All right. So the stormwater utility, we're projecting between 2023 and 2029 to fund about $29 million in projects, and about half of that would be mains at 14.3 million. There's a Perrineville Creek Basin project for a little bit under 8 million. The Lake Ballinger facility at 3.2 million, and then everything else basically 3.7 million. And utility cash is expected to cover about 70% of the planned project costs. 25% of the cost is expected to be funded by grants, and then the remaining 5% would be expected to be covered with ARPA funds. And so there's no debt issuance projected for the stormwater utility, but yeah, that's the funding breakdown. Looking at the near-term financial plan, we're showing rate increases of 12.5% to 13% for the next 4 years, and then no increases in 28 or 29. And that's driven in part by the capital plan, but also with pressure on the operating cost increases. And I see a hand up.
Vivian, your hand's
Yes.
still up. I think that might be a residual.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's go ahead.
Okay, and so then to kind of show you what the reserve is doing here, so what we're showing is basically the stormwater utility began 23 with about $4 million, and through the capital investment, we're showing it drawing the balance down, and then similarly managing to that 180-day target. Now, the point I'll make here, as popular as this target seems to be right now, is that even though the stormwater utility is not issuing debt, we're projecting that and designing rates as if they need to meet that standard, because ultimately when you issue bonds with the enterprise funds, they're jointly secured with all the utilities revenue, so water, sewer, and storm. And so the policy, if it applies to one, applies to all of them. And so for simplicity, we assume that each utility meets that standard independently, rather than saying, well, water is meeting more and stormwater can meet less or whatever. But that's really driving it. So once we get to that pinch point in 27, then we don't need any more rate increases, and then the cash builds up at least until future projects are identified to spend that money. Any questions about stormwater before I jump into sewer?
Yeah,
As that statement is.
I had a couple. Is the Lake Ballinger facility the infiltration facility we're talking about for Mathey Ballinger, Oscar? Is that one is?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the Perrineville Creek Basin at 7.8 million. How is that number derived, and what's in that? What's that consist of?
It's a number of projects, but Mike.
So yeah, so that's basically the project that we're all talking about as far as trying to get the creek daylighted both at the railroad tracks and at Talbot Road. That is the latest. Yeah, that's the latest number that we have. It includes the assumption that we're going to be getting funding in regard to whatever you want to call it, all the grants that hopefully we can get, and ARPA funds. So in other words, there's a lot of offsetting funds to pay for that overall project.
Okay,
So it's really is the work to restore the habitat, for the fish habitat, and really the stormwater capacity for that creek from, starting from
Right, and some of it there, I mean, there
yeah.
are other costs in there within the capital that cover what we've talked about as part of the stormwater management action plan. But yeah, most of the Parentville number is what we're doing for Talbot Road and for the railroad tracks. And there's of course other things that we're doing, trying to look at the overall basin, trying to find ways to mitigate stormwater flows and so forth. So it's pretty much that whole gamut of costs and projects that we've gone over as far as trying to address those issues that are currently in that basin.
Great. Diane, do you have a question?
Yeah, and Mike, I'm gonna send you what we have in the CFP, just a byproduct for Yost and Seaview Reservoir, which is why I was shocked, because you only show 805,000 in the CFP. But the Parentville does in fact itemize it at 7,050,000, but it does in fact, I don't know if these ARPA funds are accurate anymore. So I guess the concern I have is we're still talking in generalities, but some of these numbers are not jiving with what's being shown to us. So I think we need to really either have another study session with the council or whatever to go through these numbers. But, I don't see us spending over $1.2 million of ARPA money, because at one point in time we had 1.4 million or even 2.5 million for Parentville, and it has gone down considerably. And then it's forecasting 3.5 million in grants, where I think we could probably get more grants in that respect. So I guess my concern continues to be these numbers aren't jiving with what I see as reality right now on some of this stuff.
No, and you're right. I mean, a lot of that discussion still, these numbers are good as of, the last couple months. But you're right, the ARPA discussion is still happening. So this is the best information that we have right now. And so once the budget is completely done, I think that will be a little bit different. But I don't expect it to go well, if we don't show the $1.2 million, for example, in ARPA funds here, our rate's going to be a little bit higher. And also grants, we don't want to be too optimistic about the grants. These are some realistic assumptions on the $3.7 million that we think we can still get, because that's what Mike has been able to work with and try to secure. So these are really good projections. We feel good about these projections. So that's why they're here.
Yeah, and a lot of this effort, started at the beginning of the year, and it has worked throughout. So there may still be some slight disconnections here and there, but there's no way to make it exactly right at the time of all the budgets that are going to come in. That there's no way that's going to happen, because by the time then we get the rates, build the rates, approve everything, next thing you know, it's kind of this snowball or whatever you want to call it, trying to catch up to get everything right at the same time. So budgets always have a way of changing one way or the other, and I agree with Oscar. We're trying to be, as not necessarily we're trying to be conservative on the side of trying to keep the rates low. That's what we're trying to drive to. But again, we're open for more discussions about this. It's complicated.
Oh, undoubtedly it's complicated, but like I said, I think that there's some grant potential there, but we don't need, that can be a separate discussion, which we're trying to get through. But like I said, I'm going through the CFP, and these numbers, some of these numbers aren't jiving. So that's just my concern. And, I agree, you're trying to beef up these amounts so that we can save, because the bonding so far is just going to be the $10 million for water for the two
water, and then there's going to be sewer. We'll get the sewer one as well, just because of all the other things. There's no way we can
I better
not
stop
bond
talking
for sewer. Yeah, the sewer one, we'll get to it, so we can talk about
Okay.
it once we get there.
But anyway, so those are my concerns. And like I said, I feel that some of these numbers are not accurate, but then we'll just move on. Okay.
Okay, so there's more discussion needed about Perrinville Creek and we'll deal with that later, but yeah, let's move on to sewer utility.
Okay.
Well, we didn't show the rates. The rates are going to be increased by 13%.
Yeah.
This is going to be hard.
And so, yeah, the bi-monthly rate currently
$6
$46.90.
increase. Yeah.
What was that?
No, I was gonna say $6 is
Oh, yeah.
monthly, right?
This is bi-monthly.
Yeah.
So it's $3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, the problem with stormwater, for the most part, at least historically, it's you have big percentages on a relatively small number, even though as time goes on, the stormwater rate gets large enough where you can't say that anymore. But so the sewer utility, we're showing funding $106.4 million in projects from 2023 through 2029. The sewer projects amount to about 29.4 million, and that's dominated by the main replacements. Projects at the Edmonds wastewater treatment plant are about 53.9 million. And then the Linwood wastewater treatment plant, Edmonds share is about 23 million. And so the sewer utility cash is expected to cover about 36% of the planned costs. About a quarter of the cost is projected to come from the treatment plant partners for the Edmonds wastewater treatment plant costs. And then we're showing that 41.4 million would be funded by debt. And so the net issuance of 45 million increases the annual debt service by about 3.6 million. And so that, as we can see on the next slide, as that debt service increases from kind of a smaller green sliver here to a bigger number toward the end of the forecast, that is driving pressure, as well as the need to generate cash to contribute to the capital projects and keep up with the operating cost increases and so forth. And so what we're projecting for sewer, 2 years of 10.5% increases, followed by 4 years of 10% increases. And so in terms of the bi-monthly bill for a single family home, we're showing it in the near term about $11 to $13 increase each year in that bi-monthly bill. And then just to show the forecast of the sewer utility reserves, the sewer utility began 2023 with a little bit over 12 million, and the near-term capital program is drawing the balance down to 2025. We're projecting the 41.4 million in bond funding for the CIP, and that basically is going to go from 25 through 27, and then basically longer term continuing to manage toward that 180-day bond issue. And so just to show the bi-monthly single family bill comparison for a single family home at 14 CCF, under the current rates, you're toward the lower middle end of the spectrum, which I found interesting considering the rate increases that I showed historically from 2010 onward. After all those increases, you're still at the kind of the low middle part of the range. And then at least the first step, the relative rankings don't change. So the cumulative impact of that first set of increases in 24 would get the bill from 261.49 to 288.44. And so that's a big jump, but still less than Shoreline is currently charging, and then all the utilities above there. And so it's not to make light of the increases because they are significant. But a lot of these other communities are dealing with similar problems, like the nutrient removal and solids handling and things like that on the wastewater side, and water. I mean, the ones that get water from Everett ultimately, I mean, they're paying those 8% water increases as well. And so anyway, this provides the same comparison. But I think that's the bulk of the rate study discussion. Are there any other questions or comments on it?
Yeah, Diane, go ahead.
Yeah, I asked these questions, so I know they have the answer. First of all, how on earth did we double the cost of our treatment plant. It used to be 23 million and now it's up to 53.9. There's nothing in the CIP or CFP to show any number close to that. In fact, the most is 14 million. So how did we get up to 53 million as total cost? Or why are you using that as a indicator?
Again, it's something that, you know, we go back to the most, you know, that's still a projected cost on the next, you know, permit cycle when we actually have to implement some nutrient removal measures. And so it's a very rough estimate, but I think it's still conservative. You know, I think it's $20 million in a couple of years. And it's the best that we have right now. We don't have a design, we don't have a full analysis, but we have some rough estimates on what it will cost to do those projects.
Well, the nutrient removal only is for 300. I guess I'm a little confused. We're talking about our sewer treatment plant that we bonded for 20. We didn't bond for 23 million, but we bonded for, I think, 13 million or something around there. So you're now saying that we're going to have to bond $53 million more. And that is our share of the share. I mean, that's a 50% share. So are you saying our treatment
No,
plant
that's all of
is
it.
going to, pardon?
That's the full amount, not taking out any of the shares for everybody. So that's
Okay.
purely the nutrient removal number. So that's what's come down from DOE as required to be done. So in other words, it's something, if I recall correctly, from talking to Ross, it wasn't in the previous rate structure and nobody really knew what this number is. And this is the best available number that we currently have to do that project.
But this was the issue I had in 2019, because I know Phil Williams used the total amount because he thought that the city of Edmonds was going to bond for all 23 million. And then we were going to have the individual units pay, you know, groups pay us. So
You're getting
Go
the
ahead.
gasification project confused with the nitrification project. So
Well,
the
I have the
previous bond,
nutrient removal. Okay, is this a new project? Is this a new sewer plant I'm unaware of?
this would be the new permitting requirements that are coming down from DOE, where we have to remove nitrogen from our effluent.
Yeah, I know about that.
So the
I'm
previous
trying to,
bond, the previous bond was for the gasification and the incineration project. So that's what that bonding was for.
correct. But
So
my question was that we use the 23 million as opposed to our share, which was basically half. So why would we not just use our half share, about 25 million on this as opposed to 53?
that has been taken out. So in other words, I think that just shows the whole project, and then he's got it broken down as far as what it takes. So in other words, the Edmonds wastewater treatment plant, I think that 53.9, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, is the whole total project for it. It doesn't take out the share. So in other words, back out 50% of that 53.9. We're not paying that.
26.5.
Good.
So,
Okay,
yeah.
so we're not going to be bonding 53 million.
No, we're not
Correct.
going to be bonding that amount. No, it's just that it's going to be a $53 million project. So that
Which
it's
is
going to be
shock.
right. I mean, but that's the best number right now that we've gotten from our consultants.
Okay, and then I know this is getting late, and then we probably should just have a special session just dealing with this. So are you telling me that that the Linwood WWTPS project is estimated about $230 million, since our 11% share is 23.1 million?
Yes.
Are they building a brand new plant?
Yes.
Yes.
And where's that going?
Where the old
The
plant
same
is,
place.
it's going to be complicated.
They have a big challenge.
And they're
This is-
estimating it to be $230 million?
By the time it's all said and done, over, I want to say 6 to 10 years total.
Wow.
So if you look at the rate increase, I think some years are like
Yeah.
18-19%.
Yeah, they're predicting 20% increases for a while of their sewer rates. I want to say at least the next 4 or 5 years. It's all approved.
Okay, that's shocking to me again.
And this
Yeah.
is
It's
not,
shocking night for me.
you know, a lot of the utilities in the country,
Yeah, I
they're
think,
at that
yeah,
time
yeah, I
where
think all the
we're all in
waterworks,
the
oh, sorry.
replacement era. You know, we're all into that place where we need to our utilities are old and they're reaching their life expectancy. Some are beyond the life expectancy, and so it's a problem for all of us who have to deal with this.
Well, Chris and John, this is good information and a nice presentation. It's obviously very impactful to our residents here and businesses, and it's complicated for sure. So this will take some discussion. So what are we thinking of? Is Neil still on?
I am here.
On our
I am
standard
here.
agenda, Neil?
I can't, let's see, yeah, I'm here.
Consent again? Really? No.
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 Yeah, no, this is the one that I think is really, this is really impactful for
No,
us.
I know. It has
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. I guess, one other little tidbit. Can you go back to the comparators, Chris? Just wanted to point this out. You'll all know Mount Lake Terrace is number 1. Back in 2019, they were behind us.
No, and Linwood is still low. Is that for
Linwood is
the-
still low, but they're going to catch up hard with their sewer at 20%. I think their other rates are, I want to say, at like 6 or something, but the other one is in the 20s. So
this is
they're
not
going to
the-
move up fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Do you guys
so-
have any idea as to why the other cities are so high? Like I'm thinking Woodinville and Lake Stevens. They're newer cities.
They are newer cities, but some of them are hooked up to King County Metro. So on top of paying for their own sewer, this is just for the sewer, they actually also have to pay King County. So like I live in Seattle, I pay Seattle fees, and then I pay an additional like $50 to $100 on top of all my sewer toward that. And then some of the other folks on top, I want to say Woodinville and maybe Bothell get their water from Seattle, which is more expensive, how much they charge. But
Yeah.
then after that, I know Mount Lake Terrace gets water from Alderwood like we do. And I think Lake Stevens maybe gets theirs from Cascadia.
So different factors, but I guess what I'm getting at is we're relatively in better situations than other comparator cities.
Yeah, there is that. And I guess one last thing to point out, just because I've discussed this in the past as well. We do have a program for low income and seniors, so they can get up to 50% off their utility rates. So that is available. And it's some forms that would need to fill out as far as just figuring out how much money they make in a year, and that gets all put in, and they either can save, like I said, they can save up to 50% off their utility bills.
Yeah, so this is one of those important discussions that we will include in our budget deliberations over the next 6 weeks or so, and we'll find a way to dial it in. There are 5 council members on this meeting right now, so we're getting a really good head start on this. So just from the standpoint of being able to summarize it, into more like a 20-minute presentation will be helpful. But I still think this is one of those ones that's going to require a good amount of council deliberation.
Well, and I think it's important if you were to indicate, okay, so from my understanding and hearing all this, we're going to do about $45 million in bonds for 20 years. And 10 million is from water and the rest is from sewer, correct?
Let's see, so.
I'm not using quick numbers that
Yeah.
are in my head.
10, 20.
More than likely, but when you look at the timing overall, I don't think they're all going to happen at the same time, because usually bonds mature, your payoff rates are usually 2 to 3 years, depending on the bonds. So for the sewer, really, the big hit's going to be a few years down the line.
Yeah,
For
'cause
the
say,
water, it's going to be sooner.
yeah, and I mean, again, we should get involved with bond counsel with this, because wouldn't we want to go out like 30 years for sewer or so? I mean, so these are a whole bunch of different questions to
Yeah,
be
it
in.
all depends on the rates and everything else. So yeah,
Correct.
it would just be truly, whatever the market gives and so forth, we would need to look into that. And I mean, Chris gave his best, professional opinion on what that would look like. But of course, for all we know, something can change in a few months. But yeah.
Mhm.
And also bonding more is better for the rates if we can do it. It's just a question of finding the projects to do.
Yeah.
Well, and I think Diane raised a good point, is what is the most favorable way to bond for these? And most of these projects, like wastewater treatment's usually like a 50-year replacement, isn't it? So bonding for 30 years, it would not be unreasonable.
When it would at least suppress some of those high interest or high rates of you.
Yeah.
I mean, those rates are just I mean, I can hear people now. I mean, and I mean, all of this is great information. Don't
Yeah.
get me wrong. But again, it's just was sort of a shock to me, because I didn't realize we were bonding, and as soon as we were, and then when you put everything together, it's like, wow. So,
But they are good projects, and they're important projects
Yeah.
for our city. So yeah.
oh yeah.
So,
We just
Yeah,
need to
great.
make sure that the CFP CIP is updated, because like I said, with the Seaview and Yoast, it just shows like 805.
Well, the new one, the old one, yeah, because we didn't have the estimates, but the new budget will have all those numbers updated and in there, so they're factored in. I mean, I guess the other thing as well, the percentages, of course, can look high, but then when you look at the comparators, it's really the dollars. So it's kind of like, talking about like a Mont Lake Terrace, if their rates are only going up 2%, it may end up being the same amount as us going up 5% or something else like that. So there's something to be said. Once your rates get so high, the percentages do get smaller, just because in order to get that incremental dollar amount, it takes less of a percentage.
You reach what Mount Lake Terrace is currently charging in 27.
Okay.
So they are at 368.03.
Yeah, and I know they're going up more
Yeah.
because they were upside down in 19. They couldn't even afford to maintain their system.
And just one final question for Oscar and Mike. Yeah, Diane and I had a series of questions about this item that we emailed to you. I don't want to belabor time tonight to go through all these, but maybe Oscar, if you could coordinate responses to those questions to us, we could just rake off the ones that are critical then and include those in the agenda item when this comes forward to council next time. So we don't take up the time this evening. Does that work?
Yes, we can do that. We have pretty brief responses. I mean, are there any particular ones that are really super? Most of them are. I think a lot of them probably we answered throughout.
I think maybe some of these are more clarifying, some are more critical, I think. I don't know. Diane, do you want to work with me, kind of go through these questions, see which ones we really need to have them work on for us?
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, if you want to do another special meeting just to really dive into the numbers, I have no problem doing that too, if you want to do it on.
Right,
but yeah, that's fine with me.
Okay.
$230 million for a Linwood sewer plant. Wow, that's going to be a good story tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's shocking. Okay, John, Chris, Oscar, Mike, very helpful.
Very
much. Appreciate your time and look forward to talking about this more. And I think we do have one final item on our agenda this evening. That would be the franchise extension for a new singular wireless PCS agreement. And I'm not sure who's with us tonight, if we have one of our lighthouse attorneys here to present that at this late hour. I don't see anyone here. Oscar, are you going to take this one on, or
me? Rob, do you remember this, let me see. It was,
It sounds like something that Jeff would be doing.
I mean, we're familiar with this, but I wasn't,
I was just gonna say, Jeff gave me this memo to input. I input it for him, just assuming that someone from Lighthouse would be here, but I don't see anyone.
and this is the site at one of our reservoirs, right, Rob? I want to say this is the one.
You're on mute.
I was expecting Jeff to take this one, so Oscar, I don't have the background.
Yeah.
Well, I read it and I didn't have any questions, I'll tell you that much, so.
Yeah, I didn't either, actually, so I thought this would go pretty quickly, so. Do we roll the dice on this one and send this through on consent, and people can pull it if they have questions for Jeff?
I would, I mean, I read it and it
I
seemed
did.
fine to me.
Yeah. Let's do that. Okay, folks, with that, at this lovely 10 o'clock hour, which we seem to have a habit of reaching fairly often, we'll adjourn our meeting at 9:55 p.m. and I thank you all for your diligence and time.
I
Thank
thank
you.
everyone too. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, John.
Sure, thank you. Bye.